start with a very inspiring quote from Thomas Jefferson. He said, "Cultivators of the earth are the most valuable citizens." Could not say it better. We all need to eat every day, and we need to figure out how to do that in the best way, most efficient way possible, because that world population continues to grow. So we'll go ahead to the next slide here. And this is kind of the structure of what I want to talk about today. And it looks like a pretty good list, but I'm going to try to move through it pretty quickly so we do save some time for questions. And so we'll just jump to the next slide. I think every Farm Bill discussion has to start with the discussion of, well, who actually writes the Farm Bill? Very complex document. I've been around a lot of farm bills through the years, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to sit down and write this thing and put it together. So who are those players going to be? Mackenzie, let's take a look at that. Well, Mike Johanns at one time was the Secretary of Agriculture. But what I really want to talk about today, though, is I am the chairman of agriculture for Alliant Group. It's been a great association. And we're just happy to be working with Colorado Livestock Association. So, Mackenzie, we're going to focus now on the next slide. And here's a very, very key person. This is Senator Debbie Stabenow. She is the chair of the Senate Agriculture Committee. She was chair when I was there in the Senate. Very, very capable person, understands the Farm Bill. She's been down this road before. Interestingly enough, I think it was just today, it was today or yesterday, that she had to beat back a rumor that's going around that she will be named the president of Michigan State, I believe it was. She said, no, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to write this Farm Bill. So she'll be a key player. But the next person is also a very key player. So we'll take a look at Senator John Bozeman. John came to the Senate after I was there. Very talented guy, comes out of Arkansas. What I would say about John, he knows his way around the Farm Bill. And in view of the fact that he comes out of the South, any Farm Bill is going to be very definitely protective of Southern crops. The other thing I'd mention about John, he's made it very, very clear that he's not going to sign off on a Farm Bill unless reference prices are increased. So those of you out there who are paying attention to that debate, Senator Bozeman is in your corner. Now let's turn our attention to the House side of the equation. This guy, Congressman Glenn Thompson, is the chairman of the House Ag Committee. This is his first time as chair, but I will tell you folks, I've been very, very impressed with him. He knows what he's doing. He handles himself well. I just don't think he can be stumped on a question. As things have come up, he's answered the questions very knowledgeably. So I think we're in good hands. Now, the House is Republican, the Senate is Democrat, so kind of setting up some debate there between both sides of the aisle. The next person I would mention is the ranking member, Congressman David Scott. He was the chair when the House was majority Democrat. He is now the ranking member. And here's what I would say about Congressman Scott. He certainly pays attention to agriculture, but I would say from everything I've read, his heart really is in the SNAP program, the old food stamp program. So pretty much he's out there saying every day, you can't cut a penny out of that program. And as I talk about the Farm Bill here in the next few slides, you're going to see how important that statement is. And the last thing I'd say about Congressman Scott is he's got an ally on the Senate side with the chair, Debbie Stabenow. So the two of them are basically saying no cuts to the SNAP program. So let's go to the next slide, Mackenzie, and let's talk about the politics. You know, this is Washington, and you would think eating would not be a political debate, but it is. And so let's kind of line up what the politics looks like. Well, I've got a picture here that I'm going to talk to you about and talk about a group in the House. that is all Republican, and it's called the Freedom Caucus. It's about 40 members. I'm sure you've heard about him. Matt Gaetz is on the left-hand side there on the screen, and Matt probably is the most famous, so I put him up there. Matt's gotten a lot of attention because the gentleman to his right, Kevin McCarthy, was the Speaker of the House until Matt started an effort to remove him. And of course, that effort was successful. I'll talk more about that as we go along here. Here's what I'd say about the Freedom Caucus, folks, before I get to this slide. The Freedom Caucus makes no pretense about how they campaigned to get elected. They went out in their districts and said, we think spending at the national level is out of control. So they didn't go to Washington to vote for big spending bills. They went to Washington to redesign what's going on there. So we'll hear more about them as this debate on the Farm Bill goes forward. If I might, before we go to the next slide, late breaking news, literally within the last hour, Republicans have elected a speaker, a gentleman by the name of Mike Johnson. Mike comes out of Louisiana. Interestingly enough, Louisiana now has the top two positions in the House, Steve Scalise and Mike Johnson. Mike is not well known, but interesting, he said recently, this day or the day before, he said, look, we're going to do a farm bill and we're going to do it, I think he's shooting for November, which seems way, way aggressive. But it's going to, we'll have to see what kind of farm bill comes out of the House. And like I said, we'll talk more about that. So let's put up that next slide, Mackenzie, and let me talk about the spending. Well, this is the debate. I could tell you that if you could solve this slide, you could figure out how to get a farm bill done before the end of the year. Folks, this will be the first $1 trillion farm bill. This farm bill will be $1,463 billion, according to latest scoring by the Congressional Budget Office. That is a 10-year cost. Keep in mind, this will be a 5-year bill, but the Congressional Budget Office always scores things for 10 years. Now, here's one of the major points of the debate. If you look at the slide there and see the nutrition piece of this farm bill, $1,463 billion, $1,223 billion, or 84%, is for nutrition. By and large, that's the SNAP program, the old food stamp program. Conservation is about 60 billion, commodity titles about 69 billion, all others about 19.5 billion. So you can see where the spending takes place in this farm bill and what's going to be the target for folks like the Freedom Caucus. They're going to be talking about stiffer work requirements. They're going to be talking about a whole host of issues, and they're going to want to cut that spending there. Again, let me remind you, Scott and Bozeman are saying no cuts to that program. So stay tuned, big debate is coming, which takes us to our next slide. This is just another way of looking at that spending. We put it in a pie chart just to illustrate and give you a little more specificity as to how the spending plays out here. But far, far and away, nutrition's the largest. Crop insurance, which is a very, very well-received program for row crops, especially in the Midwest, but it's a program that is spreading nationwide. You see that there, commodity title, conservation, trade, horticulture, research, miscellaneous, and energy. But again, that big item there is the nutrition piece of this, and that's going to get a lot of debate and attention. Which brings me to the next slide, where we talk about the policy involved here. So let's go to the next slide, Mackenzie, and review the policy. First thing I need to tell you, a lot of times after a disaster somewhere in the country, or maybe drought in the Midwest, or maybe it's livestock losses because of heat, or winter weather. It could be a whole host of things. Ad hoc spending is added to an emergency appropriation. Not uncommon to see that. Since the last farm bill was passed, there's been a number of those items. So let me just kind of run through those. If you remember, we had a big fight with China when President Trump was in office. President Trump decided that it was appropriate to get some additional funding out into, a lot of that went into the Midwest to row crop producers, $25 billion. There was a COVID rescue plan, $30 billion went into ag. There was more nutrition spending in that, 60 billion went into that. You know the debate about the Inflation Reduction Act. 17 billion was set aside for conservation, kind of geared toward climate change. And then 15 billion was identified for disaster assistance. Let me, if I might, just take a moment and pause on that $17 billion figure. That money, by and large, is still there and available, although the USDA is working to get that money out into the countryside. Many on the Senate side especially are saying to the chair, Debbie Stabenow, let's use that money for the farm bill. It'll make our job a lot easier, because right now they're scrambling to figure out how to come up with this money. And so far, Chair Stabenow is saying, no way, no how. We worked hard to get that in the Inflation Reduction Act, so I'm not giving a penny on that into the farm bill. That's going to stay earmarked for conservation, and conservation really tied to the whole idea of climate change. So let's go to the next slide. So this is where I see the political battleground shaping up. The SNAP funding level, we've talked about that. Work requirements for SNAP. I just think you're going to see that coming out of the House. 400 farm groups joined together and said they wanted some more spending put into the farm bill. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is kind of an eye-popping number, and I will be surprised if Congress goes and tries to find more money. If anything, I think they're going to try to slim this farm bill down. Climate change programs will get a debate. By and large, Republicans look at those and say, we do not want conservation programs and other programs tied to climate change initiatives. Democrats are on the other side of that issue. Nutrition advocates will want no cuts. And again, I've talked about that in terms of Mr. Scott and Debbie Stabenow, but there's a whole host of groups out there who are saying no more cuts, no more work requirements, leave nutrition alone. And then you have the Freedom Caucus, and that's why I put that slide up there of Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy, and the debate that goes on in the House. They're going to want less spending. They may even come from a very rural part of the country, but they're still going to want less spending. And again, in fairness to them, they didn't campaign on more spending. They campaigned on this idea that they wanted to cut spending and redesign how Washington operates. So stay tuned. That's going to be a battleground. And the last thing I want to mention on that slide, the overall pervasive thing that's going on here is this. You see the leadership in both the House and the Senate saying the same thing. We need a bipartisan farm bill. Now, to you and I, that sounds great. You know, Republicans, Democrats joining arms, working together, get a farm bill, get it passed, president signs it, everybody's happy. But that's going to be hard to accomplish. I think the Senate side is going to be more bipartisan just simply because of the nature of the Senate. And you need 60 votes to pass it in the Senate. So 60 out of 100 senators need to vote yes to get it passed. The House, on the other hand, is a majority-based body. So the majority is with the Republicans. If they agree to cut SNAP and cut whatever else they want to cut, they can do it. So you could end up, and I believe you will end up, with a House version. And again, I'll point out that the new speaker is saying, let's get that done right now, sometime in November. So that seems way ambitious. but you could have a House version, you could have a Senate version, and they would be very, very different farm bills. And so stay tuned. There's a lot to be done here. So Mackenzie, let's go to that next slide that you had up there. So welcome to the Senate and the House is the best thing I can say at this point. I had question marks because 2 hours ago, I didn't know who the speaker was. I knew that Speaker McCarthy wasn't there anymore, of course, but many, many attempts at electing a speaker have occurred. Finally, Mike Johnson from Louisiana has been elected speaker. Big question for Mike Johnson is he going to let this farm bill, $1.4 trillion of spending, go to the floor to get a bipartisan vote? Or is he going to let his caucus shape it? And in that case, I think there will be cuts to SNAP and other things. But then the question is, could you get that kind of farm bill passed in the House? And I think that'd be very difficult to accomplish, to be very candid about it. If you pass a farm bill in the House with no Democrat votes, they all vote against it. Keep in mind the majority party in the Senate is Democrat. So if it passes in the House with no Democrats supporting it, you can almost guarantee that it's a farm bill that won't go very far, because Stabenow is the key person writing the bill. And again, I'll just say, I think odds are pretty good that in the Senate, a bipartisan farm bill will be passed. So Mackenzie, let's do the next slide. So what about livestock? Here are some of the things that I see out there that you can pay attention to. And I suspect we have people on the call who are also beneficiaries of insurance programs in the farm bill, maybe commodity titles because they raise corn or soybeans or wheat or whatever. But here, I wanted to focus really on what's in this and what's important for livestock and what you might want to pay attention to. Well, the first thing that I believe is going to be an issue to come out of the farm bill, I won't guarantee it will happen, but by and large, people in the livestock industry, and generally Republicans, do not like voluntary conservation programs that get all tangled up in climate change. Generally, people want a voluntary conservation program that they can choose to participate in or not choose to participate in, and tying it up with a lot of requirements and regulations and hurdles to jump over is not well received. The second item is EQIP. I can tell you from my years of experience in this area, EQIP is probably the most popular conservation program out there. There just seems to be about an endless need for that. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, even with tight budget issues, you could see more funding for EQIP. I just think conservation pulls a lot of people in that support the whole concept. And so I'll go out on a limb and say, I think we'll see some more funding for EQIP. Animal health funding, very important. I think it probably status quo when it's all said and done. But you could see some additional funding there just because it seems like we're fighting more and more problems when it comes to animal health. I do believe that you'll see more risk management opportunities. The USDA has bought into that. The House and the Senate have bought into that. The whole idea of crop insurance and other types of insurance for various ag products is definitely been well accepted in the House and the Senate. So I think you'll see gradual expansion in that area. Disaster programs are hugely important, as you all know. Disaster happens. There's no way you can plan for it. Bad weather in the winter, extreme heat in the summer, drought, whatever it is. So there's two key programs, the Livestock Indemnity Program, Livestock Forage Program. I believe that we will see those continue to be funded and help in circumstances where the programs have relevance. There will be no standalone livestock title. I don't think it gets any traction in the House or the Senate. The White House is not pushing for it. And very definitely out in livestock country, you just hear of really no support for that idea. So if you're concerned about that, I don't see it happening. And then the final thing I'd mention, it's not really a farm bill issue, but I don't care where you go. You can be in the middle of California talking to farmers out there, or you can be in the middle of Colorado and they're saying less regulation. We're just overwhelmed with regulation these days. That's not likely to happen in the farm bill, but I can guarantee it's an issue you'll be hearing more and more about through your associations. So let's go to the next slide. So here are my top 10 items that I think will happen in the farm bill. The commodity title, I believe, will be unchanged with possible improvement in the reference prices. After all, the ranking member in the Senate, John Bozeman, has said, hey, I'm not signing off on a farm bill that doesn't increase reference prices in the commodity title. I do believe, item number 2, that the conservation title has the best chance of funding. A lot of buy-in there. I'm optimistic that it might get some more funding. Item number 3, I do think you're going to see some minor climate approaches in the conservation title. It allows Democrats to claim victory, but I don't think it's going to be huge and overwhelming. I don't think you could get a farm bill passed that's bipartisan if it were. I think crop insurance will continue to be the major safety net for crop production. I think you'll continue to see expansion and other ideas tested with safety net insurance programs. So stay tuned. I think the USDA has bought into that, House and Senate have. So I think that will see some expansion. I think at the end of the day, nutrition is going to be very close to fully funded, if not fully funded. I just think if you're going to get a bipartisan farm bill, which is the only way I think you can get a farm bill done, this is probably going to have to be a compromise point. No one likes to hear that, but the truth of the matter is, I think that's a real battleground, might be the biggest battleground in the farm bill. I think all of the programs will be largely status quo. There may be a little tweak here and there. So don't call me when the farm bill's passed and say, well, this turned out to be a little different. There can always be that sort of thing. There can always be test things going on where they're putting some money aside to test something. So we'll see, but I think it's by and large status quo. The next item, and Debbie Stabenow was talking about this today, as a matter of fact, Commodity Credit Corporation. That's a fund at the USDA. I think it's $30 or $35 billion that the secretary has huge discretion in how it's going to be spent. When we had our trade dispute with China, the money that President Trump sent out to farmers came out at commodity credit. Some are saying we need to put guardrails on that. There have been guardrails in the past, and they were allowed to expire. But I think, again, Freedom Caucus and some of the other strong conservative spending voices are going to say, we got to rein that in. I hear a lot about regenerative agriculture. I think it means whatever you want it to mean. It's not a well-defined approach yet. Might be in time, but I don't think it's going to go far in this farm bill. The sugar program, out in Western Nebraska, you see sugar beets. I think that one is losing support. And again, I think that one will be targeted by the very conservative groups who say we shouldn't be spending on a sugar program. So stay tuned on that one. I think that could be a pretty significant battleground. There's been talk about a permanent disaster program for livestock where a certain amount of money would be set aside. I don't think it will happen. I just think money's too tight. So I think it's going to continue to be on an ad hoc basis, bad winter, animals die, trying to go to Washington and get some funding to help cover the loss there. So I don't think it will be a permanent program in the Farm Bill. So now if we can go to Mackenzie, the next slide. which is very simple. We say thank you. I appreciate it immensely. And if there are any questions, I think now would be a perfect time to try to address those questions. And I think, Mackenzie, you're going to help me with that if there are any that come to us online.
Yes, that is correct. Jessica asked, the House Ag Committee has stated they need an additional 150 billion for non-SNAP title programs. Where do they find the additional funds?
Jessica, I think I know who you are, and it's great to receive that very, very thoughtful question. And I look forward to our paths crossing. Here's what I would say. They say they need another 150 billion. You know, they're trying to get some money out of that conservation program that was established really at the urging of Debbie Stabenow in the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. She's really fighting that. I think somehow, some way, this farm bill is going to have to be delivered within the score that's out there, within the baseline. And, you know, there's 400 farm groups that can write me a letter tomorrow and say, Mike, don't talk it down. We need more money for this program. But I just think the size of this farm bill has caught everybody's attention. The scoring, as you know, Jessica, has not improved. It has gotten to be more expensive every time they score this darn thing. And so I just think that's a tough slog. I just think it's going to be hard to come up with much more money. Reference prices, I think, probably would be first on the list, but I also hear a lot of talk that people want more money for conservation. So those two might see some additional funding. I think especially reference prices, but beyond that, like I said, I think it's an uphill battle.
Perfect. Thank you. And Jessica said that it was great to see you.
Yeah.
So in 2014 and 2018, farm bills we saw on the Senate floor attack commodity programs. Can you please share your thoughts on how to communicate with senators about the importance of checkoff programs?
You know, I've always been a supporter of checkoff programs. I've been all over the world as a governor and a senator and a secretary of agriculture, and I just saw the value of those programs. There is just nothing that is equivalent to going into a market that we want to sell our products into, livestock in this case, and having the resources to promote that product and promote that product right here in the United States. So, you know, I lend my voice to this effort to tell the story about how important these programs are. Now, if somebody wants to debate with me about, well, they can be better managed and this, that, and the next thing, okay, we can have that discussion. We can always figure out a way to be more responsive to those who are paying for those programs. We can always figure out a way to be better managed within those programs, on and on. But please don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. They are important programs. They do a tremendous amount of good in terms of what we're trying to do, which is raise very quality products and sell those into the marketplace. I've just seen too much evidence through the years of just how important and valuable they are. We lose those programs, we lose some pretty substantial things that help us with producing a better product and marketing a better product. So I just hope I never see that day.
Wonderful. And then the next question is, can you please share your history and thoughts on the GIPSA, Packers and Stockyards Act rules that would jeopardize livestock producers' ability to market our livestock competitively?
Wow, you know, I could do a day-long seminar on my history with this piece of legislation, and I could do another day on all of the criticisms I've heard through the years. I doubt that there's a more controversial item out there when it comes to agriculture than this legislation. Here's what I would say. Very definitely, producers are making a case that is very strong that, look, we can't find a market for our products anymore. In terms of a market price, better way of saying that. And how do we get transparency? How do we establish market price when the system is set up so much is handled by the packers? And Republican secretaries, Democrat secretaries have worked on this issue over and over again and tried to figure out what is the best approach. How do we do this to find balance between packers and producers? And it has just been a very, very difficult thing to find that balance. Let me assure you that every secretary, myself included, wanted to make sure that our producers were cared for and taken care of, because the reason is this production could go to someplace else. It could go to Mexico. We don't want that to happen. We want that production and we want that processing to be here in the United States. Now, Secretary Vilsack has done some things in terms of, look, we need opportunities for smaller packing operations to get up and running and be competitive with the big players. He's put some money where his mouth is. He's gone out there and promoted this idea. And I haven't seen anything in terms of what the results have been. They're probably out there. I just haven't looked at them recently. But again, I just think it's an issue that we need to continue to work on and try to figure out how do we do this in a way that we protect our producers and make sure that they are here in the United States while at the same time having that processing capability here. And maybe Secretary Vilsack is onto something. Maybe his pushing to get broader opportunities for producers will pay dividends, but it's very much in its early stages, and we're just going to have to see how that plays out. Great question, very complicated, and very, very difficult to answer with 2 or 3 sentences, that's for sure.
Wonderful. And then the next question is from Russell, and he said, we know that nutrition is a big part of the Farm Bill and has been. How are we ever going to decrease the spending on it? Instead, it keeps increasing.
Russell, such a great question again. Here's just imagine this. I think when I was Secretary of Agriculture, which isn't that long ago, I think we had 25 million Americans on what was then called the food stamp program. Today, it's in the vicinity of 40 million. And here's what you're going to hear from conservative Republicans. They're going to say, look, there should be work requirements. If you're able-bodied, you should be working before you can access this food stamp. Democrats, in response to that, will say, look, the SNAP program really helps children and mothers and on and on. And so they'll have a response to that. That's where that debate is going. The only way you reduce the cost of this is you either reduce the cost of the products that are being purchased, which is very hard to do. USDA is just out in the marketplace buying like others would be buying, or you increase the requirements, the eligibility requirements. And I'm just going to be honest, I don't have any political bone to pick here, but I'm just going to tell you the finish line is to get the Farm Bill done. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be very, very difficult to make more modifications. There were some that were made in the various COVID things, but there were some expansions that were made. So my belief is that reducing this in this Farm Bill will be very much at the margins, very much at the margins.
All right. I want to welcome, if there's any more questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A for Secretary Johanns.
Mackenzie, I'd like to jump in with one.
Absolutely.
since I have the opportunity and the microphone. Given that the appetite seems to be in this Senate specifically around climate change, greenhouse gas, what do you see as that playing a critical role in the shaping of programs or the conditioning of entry into programs and even RMA in this farm bill?
Zach, that's a great question. And this debate has been around. I left the Senate in 2015. January of 2015 was my last day in the Senate. And, at that time, there was discussion about we need to have conditions to the conservation program, RMA, and that debate was going on. I don't see it as a majority position at this point. And so I'm not going to say there isn't going to be some tweaks and this and that. But I will tell you that I don't see it as dramatic. I don't see big, long list of requirements to be a part of conservation that's tied to climate change objectives or anything like that. The other thing that I will tell you is the USDA really has never gotten comfortable with exactly what its role is here. And you'll pick up articles where the USDA is trying to say, well, what is our role with carbon capture? Are we the ones who should set the standards and the metrics? And so I think we're just a long way away from that being incorporated in a farm bill. And the other thing I would tell you, again, I believe the only way this farm bill is going to get done is if it's allowed to be bipartisan. If the new speaker says, yes, I'll let this go to the floor and get the votes necessary to get passed. And I recognize some Democrats will vote for it and some Republicans will vote for it. The only way you're going to do that is by compromise and meeting halfway and doing that. And I don't think Republicans just are not shot up about this idea of a lot of requirements. There are some exceptions to that, Zach, and I can detail those. There are a few Republicans out there who have been more inclined to go in that direction, but they're very, very much in the minority. So if you want a bipartisan farm bill, you can't have a lot of strings attached to qualifying for the conservation programs or RMA or whatever.
Travis asks, given a decrease in research dollars in the farm bill, would there be an opportunity in this safety net to release a few acres on each farm to do more citizen science by producers, extension and private companies to research alternative cropping systems, still providing a safety net?
Interesting concept. It's something I've just never run into before. And the answer to the question is yes. Anything is really possible. If you're talking about a new approach, it might get some attention. And, what I'd recommend is that you push that concept to your person in the House or one of your senators or both of your senators and see if it gets any traction. But the answer to your question is that's the kind of thing that I was talking about. There are oftentimes test projects in a farm bill where, the House and the Senate are just not ready to embrace a wholesale change. Farm bills tend to be evolutionary, not revolutionary. So you might be able to get some funding to just give this a test and see if it works. So I'd give it a try, see if you can get somebody interested in it.
And then, Secretary Johanns, what happens if the farm bill doesn't get passed by the deadline?
That is such a great question. So here's where we are at. On September 30th, the last farm bill expired. Not really a crisis at this point. When it becomes a crisis is at midnight on December 31st, because every farm bill is kind of an adaptation of the original farm bill passed in the Depression years of the 1930s. So if a farm bill doesn't get done, we need an extension. And that's, there's a saying in Washington, the farm bill always gets done, it just never gets done on time. And that's kind of what's happening this year. Ranking member Bozeman in the Senate, the ranking member of the Senate Ag Committee, has already said, let's do a year extension. Glenn Thompson responded to that, basically kind of panned the idea, being, why do we need a whole year to get this done? But I think you're going to see more discussion about maybe we need to extend this. If the Farm Bill in the House is debated as quickly as the new speaker wants it debated, that sounds to me like a Republican-based farm bill where Democrats aren't supporting it. But I don't know what he has in mind. But you got to turn it loose, hopefully, to get Republicans and Democrats to buy into it. That's the only way I see a farm bill getting done. Doesn't get done, then we need an extension, or otherwise we revert back to that 1930s farm bill, which nobody should want that. That was a farm bill for Depression era farming, not for what farming and ranching is all about these days.
Evan asks, you mentioned one way of lowering the cost on the nutrition portion of the farm bill would be possibly lowering cost of products. How is that possible with massive spending on bills like this causing inflation and product prices to increase?
That was a brilliant question, because the answer to that is you're right. I looked at these statistics when I was Secretary of Agriculture, but I haven't looked at them for a while. You'd be shocked at the amount of baby formula that is purchased by the federal government in terms of the whole amount of baby formula that is produced. And I could go on and on down through the list of products. You'd just be shocked at how big a player the federal government has become in terms of purchasing commodities. It's pretty darn significant. So if you have that kind of buying going out there, likely result is that you're going to get higher costs, right? I mean, more demand, costs go higher. Supply and demand, kind of what you learned in your basic economics class. But, farm economy, the reality of it, I'm not telling you folks anything new. It does ebb and flow. The price of corn today is different than the price of corn was 2 years ago. Personally, I love it when farmers are making money and ranchers are making money. Why? Because it stabilizes not only their situation in our ag economy, but it stabilizes small towns. So somebody pulled me aside. I gave this talk recently in Northern Florida, and somebody pulled me aside and he said, Mike, I know what you're saying about the SNAP program. That's a tremendous amount of money. But he said they are buying products that we raise on the farm. Valid point. So that's the other piece of this. That's why this program, SNAP, and the Farm Bill have always been joined together. And you probably couldn't get a farm bill done without it being joined to the SNAP program, because you need those more urban House members to buy into it. So complicated issue. But at the end of the day, your question is spot on. I acknowledge that. And I also acknowledge the gentleman that pulled me aside and said, hey, they're buying our products. It's a valid point. So we're trying to find the balance here. And that's every farm bill comes down to that. What's the right balance between the various interests here?
Are there any more questions for Secretary Johanns? Available in the Q&A or the chat, or if you want to just speak up, that's welcome as well too.
Could you throw us a little insight concerning the milk market order?
Federal milk marketing order is, as you know, going through a hearing process. I'll tell you a little side story here. I just been sworn in as Secretary of Agriculture, and a reporter came up to me and he said, "Mr. Secretary, do you know when you will know that you've been in Washington too long?" And I said, "No, I don't have any idea." And he said, "When you understand how they price milk in this country, you've been in Washington too long." There's probably some truth to that. Very, very complicated process. Milk marketing orders are going to stay in the farm or stay as a part of the milk industry, to the irritation of just about everybody. There is a hearing process that was kicked off by the USDA. It's been going on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, witness after witness after witness, kind of pits the producers against the processors. At the end of the day, they recess. So we're in a recess now. The hope is that they will reconvene before the end of the year. I don't have the date in front of me, but they maybe have even set a date already. And hopefully they get that done. Well, even if they get that hearing process completed, before the end of the year, maybe soon after the first of the year, I think you're still looking at maybe 12 months, maybe 18 months before you get some final guidance from the USDA. So stay tuned. Dairy is a very complicated part of the Farm Bill. The hearing process kind of exists outside of the purview. It's going on. It will continue to go on no matter what happens on the Farm Bill. And I could give you a whole seminar on the dairy title, but milk marketing orders aren't going to go away.
Thank you, sir. We were discussing the other day inviting Dr. Newton out to one of our meetings in the summertime to hopefully do kind of a post hearing wrap up and insights briefing on that, because what a wild beast to take on, the market order.
If you get him out there, make sure you send me a notice, because I would love to sit there and listen. Or maybe you can talk him into doing a webinar like this, because there's definitely a lot of interest out there. And yeah, you're right. Talk about having the tiger by the tail. This is complicated. And like I said, witness after witness. I talked to somebody in California just recently who had been a witness, and they're just grinding through this. I mean, just day after, they needed a recess just to take a break from each other. So
take a breather.
Yeah.
I got it. I can understand and appreciate that. Well, if there's no one else, we had a great turnout, and really appreciate everybody who jumped in today and the fantastic line of questions. And if you have additional questions beyond this and you'd like us to get you some more answers, just because you'd rather a different avenue to get those answered, we are happy to forward those on to the Secretary and Michaela and get you responses. Once again, big thank you, Mr. Johanns. It's a great pleasure to get to host you and have you on one of our calls, and a real honor to have you speak from such a great point of knowledge, sir.
Well, great. Now the only last thing you have to do is invite me out to Colorado so I can test your steaks out there. All right.
Deal. All right. We'll be having a summer meeting in the mountains. I know that July in the mountains sounds like a terrible opportunity, but that is an open invitation from me to you to come and attend and be a part.
All right. Great. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Michaela, once again, thank you to Alliant Group for all that y'all do for the industry and for our members. We really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. It's our great pleasure. And like Zach said, everybody, please, if you have any questions, you can reach out to them and they will forward them to Secretary Johanns and myself. We are here as your resource for everything and anything that you may need.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Everybody have a great day and have a blessed weekend.